Hey, Morton Brookshire family and friends. This is number two in our series on the Brookshire side of the family. It's my second recording attempt. I tried to record this morning and it was such a jumbled mess. I decided I'd delete and try it again. I'm going to concentrate in this video on the Davis and the Warren lines in the family who married into the Brookshires. And there's a lot in the Warren line. The Warren line goes back to nobility in England. And I'm talking about to the Middle Ages. It's one of those lines that just goes for many, many, many generations. The Davis line, not so far back, but still very important to the settling of Buncombe County and the mountains around that area. So I'm going to start out by telling you where we plug in, and I'm going to try to do a lot of this from memory. That's a little dangerous, but I need to condense it. I need to just talk about it and not give so many details. Details might weight us down. But I do want to tell you this. I'm going to scratch the surface with the Warren family, with your Warren family, because it's volumes available. You can find it online. There's a good website called warrenfamilyhistory.com that has a lot of your family history way back for the Warren family. There's more websites than that if you Google it, but that's a pretty good one. This guy from Alabama, James Warren, has spent a lot of time researching, and he's put together a very comprehensive website on your Warren family. The name changed, of course, several times. We'll get into that in a minute. What I want to do is walk you up the ladder again, and we start at Granny. And her father was George Canada Brookshire, but people called him Kennedy. So Kennedy Brookshire, and then his father was John Newton Brookshire, who lived to be about 98 years old. He died in Dalton, Georgia in 1954. And his father was Wilbur Newton Brookshire. And if you remember from the Brookshire videos, Wilburn's a bit of a mystery because we don't really know when he died or what happened to him. He was born in, and I'm looking at my chart to get my dates right. Wilbur Newton Brookshire was born in 1833 in North Carolina. He was dead or missing by 1860. Now, sometimes people just ran away and left their families, but I really don't think Newton Brookshire did that. I can't think of any reason. I hadn't discovered any reason why he should do that. I think he died. He may have died in one of the mica mine accidents. That's conjecture, but I think that could have been. He was dead by 1860 because in that census, his wife, Mary Warren Brookshire, was in the census by herself with her children. And by the 1870, she was married to Enoch Hall, which I told you about in the last video. Enoch Hall was 40 years older than her. He was a huge landowner in Buncombe and Haywood County. Enoch Hall was well known, quite well off, and old. She married him probably for security. I don't think things really went well because her children are listed on the census as boarders. That's not too good. And her daughter's listed as a housekeeper. So something wasn't really great. So we don't know what happened to Wilbur Newton Brookshire. We don't know when he died, or we don't know where he's buried. I sure would love to find out. Mary Warren Hall, her maiden name was Warren, she married Enoch Hall, and I can't find where Mary Hall died and is buried. So one researcher said he thought she died around 1875, but I haven't seen any documentation of that. We do know when their children died. One of the reasons we know that Wilbur Newton Brookshire was referred to as Newton is on a couple of his children's death certificates. especially Parthena, his daughter Parthena. She said her father was Newton Brookshire, so people referred to him as Newton. So anyway, we're going to look at Mary Warren Brookshire Hall's line. That is Granny's great-grandmother. And Mary Warren was born in 1835. Her father was William Davis Warren, who was born in 1796 in what was then Buncombe County. And William died, we think, in 1848. I believe his will is in the Buncombe County records. And so he lived till 1848. And Polly Warren's mother was Mary Williams. And Mary, according to some death certificates, was born in Henderson County in 1801. I believe it was 1801, yeah. Now, the Williams family is really big in Hendersonville. I have Williams ancestry, and they're all one family. So all of you are my cousins. I'm sure that Mary Williams Warren was part of that big Williams family. They all came from colonial Virginia, from the coastal colonial Virginia, the Tidewater region. All those Williams did, and they came with the Warren. All of them came from there. So those were, we had the same Williams ancestors, I'm sure. Not going to talk about Mary Williams Warren's ancestors, the Williams, because I don't know a whole lot about them document-wise. But let's stick with the Warrens for a little while. William Davis Warren's parents were James Warren, who was born in what was then Rowan County. He was born in 1764. Remember, before the Revolution, before we became a country, we were a colony of England, and Rowan County was a huge county. And it's probably part of Iredell now, but he was born in Rowan County, and he was the first of the Warrens to be born in North Carolina. And he married Hannah Davis eventually, and Hannah Davis was born in 1766. And the Davises came from the Piedmont to the mountains as well. All these family lines we're talking about now came in the late 17 and early 1800s. About the turn of the century is when they came to Buncombe County. So we're going to come back to the Davises in a little bit, Hannah Davis Warren's line. And so we're at Granny's great grandparents right now. And that's James Warren and Hannah Davis. James Warren's father was James Robert Warren. It is said by most Warren researchers he was a Revolutionary soldier. I've not been able to find his records. There were quite a few James Warrens, and I'm not satisfied on which records belong to him. But if I find it, I'll put it up. But he was a Revolutionary War soldier, and James Robert Warren was born in Virginia, Spotsylvania County, Virginia, in 1740. He's the Warren who brought the family to North Carolina, probably after the Revolutionary War. That's when people started moving around. They wanted more land. And he came down at that time. James Roberts Warren's wife was Mary Mitchell. And Mary Mitchell was the daughter of Archelaus Mitchell and Ann Reed. They were also from Tidewater, Virginia, colonial Virginia, along the James River up in there. Both their families go back to the 1600s. Well, James Robert Warren's father was William Warren, and his mother was named Alice. We can't say for sure what her last name was. People have guessed at it, but I don't like guessing unless we don't have any other alternative. Usually I'll wait if we're going to guess. But William Warren's father was also named William Warren, and he was born in 1662. In colonial Virginia, and he married Elizabeth Hackley. We do know that. We have the documentation for that. William Warren's father was John Warren, who married Rachel Williams. There's the Williams again. This is the same Williams family that you find in Henderson and Buncombe County eventually. All these families came from colonial Virginia. My Williams line married into the Statons of Henderson County. The Statons came from colonial Virginia. So they're all, they're getting out of there because there's too many people coming in. And they're coming to the Carolinas to get lots of land. So John Warren's father was Sir Edward de Warrane. And here's where we start to see the name being used in England with its French origination, because de Warranes came from Normandy in northern France. And I'm going to skip some generations here. We're back to the 1600s here. And I do have a picture of Edward de Warrane, the Baron of Poynton. They were from Cheshire, England. Remember, in the Brookshires, you had a lot of those Brookshire and allied people that came from Cheshire, England. Well, so did the Warrens, the de Warranes. That's where they were from. So those families kind of came over together. Remember, we talked about why some of them left England, because even though they were nobility, they did not inherit the land. So they came to the New World to get the land. This is a portrait of your ancestor, Edward de Warrane of Poynton. That's him. That's your ancestor. That would be Granny's 9th great-grandfather. That's Edward. His father was John de Warrane, John Warren. That's Granny's 10th great-grandfather. Their family was knighted. Many of them were knighted, and they were nobles. If you go back to the time of Queen Elizabeth, Sir Edward de Warrane was knighted during her reign, but Elizabeth did not knight him. She did not knight a lot of people. She didn't like to just hand them out. The current Queen Elizabeth, she hands out knights like it's a bag of candy at Halloween. She knights every singer and every actor. She knighted Sir Paul McCartney and Sir Elton John, and she just hands them out. Elizabeth first didn't do that. She didn't like to. But who knighted your ancestor was the Earl of Sussex, because he had sent these men to Ireland to conquer certain parts of Ireland for the British crown and solidify Ireland for Great Britain. And they were successful. And so in turn, the Earl of Sussex knighted several men, about 40, including your ancestor. It upset Elizabeth. She didn't like it, but he did it anyway. And it had to be honored. So he was Sir Edward de Warrane. He married a woman named Joan Fitton. She was fitting to be a Warren. I'm sorry, that's bad, isn't it? I shouldn't have said that. Okay, so Sir Edward's father was John, who married Lady Margaret Molyneux. Molyneux is a French name. These are all people who came with the Duke of Normandy, with William the Conqueror in 1066, when he came over to England with his troops and he conquered England, William the Conqueror. A lot of our ancestors, yours and mine, go back to northern France. He took over, and a lot of lands in France belonged to England later on because of that. And so we have lots of ancestry, you do and I do, in not only England, but northern France. That's why the Warren name used to be de Warrane, because they're French people. So John de Warrane's father was also named Sir Edward de Warrane, and he married Dorothy Booth, very English name. And his father was Sir Lawrence de Warrane, and he married a woman named Margaret Lee. Now, we're back to the 14 and 1500s with those names. I could keep going to the Middle Ages with every one of these is documented, and I'll tell you why. It's very important to the nobility in England to document their heritage. So once you can make a connection to a noble family in England, the work's done for you. It's solid as a rock. So we know absolutely that this is true. You say, I can't be descended from nobility. Honey, it's documented. You are. And I've already told you one time, 60% of all Americans who can trace back to colonial ancestry, especially from Virginia and Massachusetts, are also descended from nobility and royalty. And you are too. When I get to Granny's mother's line, I'm going to chunk it out, honey, because it's there. When I get to the Bakers, it's a lot to tell you. This is just scratching the surface today. But the Warrens, the De Warrens, they go back to the time of the Magna Carta in 1215. And if you don't remember what the Magna Carta was, go study history from high school and junior high. Should have studied that in junior high. But they came over, the Warrens came over in the 1600s to colonial Virginia. And that's when your Warren family arrived, and they're documented every generation back to about the year 1090, 1100. It's well documented. They're part of the Plantagenet family. One of your ancestors was named Hameline de Warrane Plantagenet. Sometimes we pronounce it Plantagenet. They are a line of kings that ruled in England in the 11th and 12th century. King Henry II and his wife Eleanor of Aquitaine, that I previously mentioned from the movie A Lion in Winter, their sons were the Plantagenet kings. Richard the Lion-Hearted, King John, that's talked about in the Robin Hood stories. They're all from Geoffrey of Anjou in France. These are the Plantagenets, and you are descended from them. Now, Geoffrey of Anjou was the half-brother of King Henry II of England, and you are a direct descendant of Geoffrey of Anjou through the Plantagenet lines and then the De Warrens. They had manor houses, no castles for the Warrens. They had big manor houses, owned lots of land, married into noble families, married women that were descendants of kings and queens of England. And so a lot of that is in that Warren history. And if you Google, the Warren family history, or go to that website, warrenfamilyhistory.com, you'll see a lot of that. A lot of my chart information I got from ancestry.com. There's a lady on there who's really done the research for the Warrens. And there's so much there, but you say, I can't believe I'm descended from nobility and royalty. You are. So there you go. And that's just a little touch on the Warrens. I'm going to cut this down, make it a little bit shorter. It gets too heavy. Let's back up to the Davises again, that married into the Warrens, that married into the Brookshires. And we're going to go back to, let me unfold this little chart here so I can look at it. Remember, we're starting back at Mary Polly Warren, who married Newton Brookshire. That's Granny's great-grandparents. And Mary was born in 1835 to William Davis Warren, who was born in 1796 in Buncombe County. And his mother was Hannah Davis. She was the one that married James Warren that we just talked about. Hannah Davis was born in 1766 and died in 1855. Talk about her family a little bit. Hannah's father was Uriah Davis I. Uriah was probably born in Maryland. They came from Maryland. There's another family line of yours coming from colonial Maryland. Remember in the Brookshires we talked about, they came from Maryland. Why were the English going to Maryland? Some were going for religious freedom. Most of them were going for economics. And some were going as what? Indentured servants. And Uriah Davis family, his father, came as an indentured servant to pay off a debt. They worked in tobacco or allied professions. Remember, your Brookshire people were coopers. They made barrels and they shipped that tobacco back to England in those wooden barrels, and some of your people were barrel makers. So Uriah Davis the first came over here as an indentured servant in the early 1700s. Now, Uriah Davis II was your Davis ancestor who came south and moved eventually to Buncombe County. And his cabin, I believe, is still standing in Buncombe County. I'm going to post a picture of it on Facebook underneath the video. No, I already did. I posted it early today. I forgot I did that. So the picture of Uriah Davis's cabin in Buncombe County is on the Facebook group. And it used to be open periodically as a museum. I don't know if it's open now. I'm sure it's not because of COVID. But I'm not sure. It's on private land. I don't really know who owns it. I've sent a message to the Old Buncombe Genealogical Society to ask them what the status is of the Uriah Davis cabin. If we could ever get access to it, it'd be great to take a trip up there when the virus is gone. Stanley, I know you like to go and travel. So when the virus is gone, let's me and you and Donna and anybody else who wants to go, we'll make a train of it. Let's go up there and go to that cabin if we can ever get access. I'll let you know. And that would be fun to do. Uriah Davis owned hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of acres of land in Buncombe and what's now Haywood. Isn't it a shame that it never trickled down? It doesn't take many generations for all of that to be gone, dealt out and gone. You know, my ancestors, my black welder ancestors in Cabarrus County and Rowan County, my great-grandfather Jacob Robert Blackwelder, he owned hundreds of acres of land in Cabarrus County. My grandfather even never got any of it. It got parceled out through the years, and a lot of it was sold to the Philip Morris Company that built the plant there that's sitting there empty, I guess, now. It didn't trickle down to me. And it's the same with Uriah Davis. You can find land grants everywhere for him. So he owned a lot of land in the mountains. Uriah married a woman named Elizabeth Oldham. And I don't know too much about the Oldham family, but I'm going to research a little bit. And if it's got enough on it, I'll make a video. Uriah's dad, we've already mentioned, was Uriah. We call him Uriah the First. Let me look at my notes here. He was the immigrant who came from England as an indentured servant. He had a huge family, and he named a lot of his kids after Bible characters. It's a huge, long list of children for Uriah Dixon. And he gave a lot of them Bible names, and he had 3 of them named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego Davis. Ain't that great? I love that. But I found a court record where he had a child out of wedlock with a woman named Watkins. And he had to pay a big fine for that. It was these are they're called the bastardy files, and so that was not real uncommon. You know, it wasn't celebrated on Jerry Springer like it is now. It was something that you weren't supposed to do back then because we were a Christian nation. So, but it happened a lot. And you see it in the court records because humans are sinners. We're sinners, capable of anything. But it happened, and wasn't the child's fault. Might not have been the woman's fault. I don't know. But anyway, Uriah paid his debt to society on that. I think he probably kept his child up. I had a great-great-grandfather who was a doctor in Henderson County and a respected man and a deacon in the church, and he had a child out of wedlock not long before he died. Don't know the circumstances around it, but honey, God will forgive us. God will forgive you no matter what you do. So we don't want to judge people. We know what's right and what's wrong. We don't need to celebrate sin. I'm going to start preaching. I shouldn't do that. We shouldn't celebrate sin, but we got to offer mercy to the sinner. So that's all right to do that. But we don't, nowadays we celebrate sin and try to give sin special rights. I don't believe in that. That's my little opinion. You can cut this part out if you don't like it, but I have to say it. So Uriah was the one who came over. Now, his father was Evan Davis, and they were Welsh people who went to England and then came over from England to the New World. So the Davises are Welsh like the Morgans. You know, you got a lot of Welsh ancestry, and the Davises are of Welsh ancestry. And one of the early Davises, about 2 generations before Uriah, the one that came over, married a Morgan from the same area that your Morgans came from. There's also another Morgan line we're going to get to in Granny's side. So Granny and Papa were very, very distant cousins, just like many people are. Donna and I are cousins many times over. And so they didn't, I'm sure they did not know it, because I guarantee you they didn't know their ancestry back this far, but they were distant cousins. I'm my own grandpa, you know, but that's not uncommon. That's really, really common. We're not half-wits, you know, we've got all of our fingers. We're not missing fingers. We've got our faculties. We have reasonable intelligence. So we came out okay, didn't we? We sure did. Well, that's the Warrens and the Davises. The Warren family, I'm just wetting your whistle. You go find out what you want to know. Not everybody wants to know everything, but it's a very interesting family. You come from good stock. You come from people who did well when they came here. They sometimes had sad situations, but they were hardy stock. They did well, and you should be proud of them. Not necessarily everything they did, but they were basically God-fearing people who worked really, really hard and had a lot of tenacity and a lot of patience and a lot of stick-to-itiveness. And they were pioneers. They were pioneer people. And the Warrens and the Davises, thanks so much for listening in. I hope y'all stay well. Y'all pray for us. We'll pray for y'all. And when this virus is over, let's all get together. Love y'all so much. Stay well.